welcome everybody to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will have you coming back for more episodes. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, I welcome you back, and I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get to our main event, for those who are on YouTube, please make sure you hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes of the podcast. If you're tuning in from Apple Podcast or Spotify, we'd love for you to subscribe from there as well. And for those who would like to help us contribute to this platform so we can keep bringing these phenomenal educators like tonight's guest, you can send your donations to Cash App with our handle $IDTALK4ED, or you can go to Venmo with our handle at KwameSM. That's at symbol KWAMESM. And to just catch up on past episodes of the podcast, you can go to the YouTube channel, which is under my name, Sarfo-Mensah, or you can go to our main website at IDTALK4Educators.com. And as always, thank you all for the support. So today's guest is somebody who has an extensive resume in education that we will need a whole episode for. But I'll just say this. I think for those who watch or listen to this episode today, we're going to get some serious gems that are going to help us elevate our game to the next level, whether you're an educator or if you're in another industry or profession. She is a novelist. She's an educator. She is a STEM advocate. She's a mother. She holds so many roles and she excels in all of these roles. And she's an inspiration to many people who are in this international education field. So without further ado, I want to bring on Dr. Mary Ashun to the podcast to talk with us about her life and what she's up to these days. So let's bring Dr. Mary on to talk with us. Hey, Dr. Mary.
Hello. How are you, Kwame?
I'm well. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Greetings from Accra.
Oh, Majesty.
Good for you.
Yeah. So much to share. But like I do with all my guests, I always like to start from the beginning. So I know that you come from a family of educators. Both your mother and your father were in the education field. So I would assume that you gained some of that inspiration from them, but I'll let you tell the story. Who or what inspired you to want to get into this field that we love so much?
You know, I don't know if any one particular person inspired me to. I don't think we do enough of a good job encouraging children to be educators, and I see it so much in my current role, in my roles in schools, that you would go to a classroom and you ask, what would you like to be when you grow up? And it's almost the same every single time, where the infant school kids up to about age 7 or 8, teacher is right up there with doctor and lawyer and engineer and all that. And then as they start growing older, the teacher starts dropping off, And this has been the story in the States, where I did my program, and in Canada, where I taught extensively, and then here in Ghana. And everywhere else that I visit, I ask kids, and it is sad. And so I don't think that, I know I wanted to be a doctor. So after I got my PhD, I said, oh, well, I did become a doctor, right? But I never thought that I wanted to be a teacher, right? But when I do think about it, there are certain bits that I picked up from certain key people. And you mentioned my parents. My mom, I think what I picked up from her was just the energy to try new things, right? That as an educator, you can't sit still. You have to always be reinventing yourself. And
Right.
mom is a mistress of reinvention, right? And when I think about dad, is the fact that he had a really good knack for environment and strategy. And what I mean by that is, depending on what he wanted to teach you, right?
Mm-hmm.
He created an environment to make sure that that thing stuck. So whether it was in a group with your siblings, whether it was one-on-one, whether it was just taking you out to dinner, whatever it was, he seemed to plan it, right, to be able to achieve the maximum. And then I had a teacher in high school, he was my chemistry teacher. And from him, I'll say just the sheer excitement. You know, the word I'll use for how he entered the classroom was that he bounded into the classroom. He was never slack or looking upset to be there. He had so much energy, you know. And when I became a teacher, I kept okay, that's the kind of energy I want, because I'm teaching a tough subject, but somehow kids don't want to leave my class because I know I've got that energy. And then last but not least was a professor of mine in college. And she taught me biology. And, university, people don't get up to go to class, right? They have to really be forced to, maybe their presence there gives them points or whatever. They're graded on that. But if they're not graded on that, they aren't going to be bothered, right?
Mm-hmm.
This professor's class, there was a queue outside her classroom. Every single time, a queue, right? And then you get into the class and she doesn't even have a textbook. She's leaning on her desk and everything is just pouring out. And I remember thinking, I want to be so knowledgeable that it just pours out of me, So subject matter expertise right there. And with my teacher, passion, with my mom, reinventing things, and with dad, planning, a lot of planning. So all of these people, now that you're asking me the question and I'm sort of like pulling, from all sorts of places, I can see that this was my inspiration, not to become a teacher, but after I chose to become a teacher, to become the best that I could.
Yeah. And I think the creativity part is so important, especially when you think about teachers today.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we'll get into it when we talk about just professional development and the state of it, not just in Ghana, but really across the African continent, because it's a issue that does need that attention.
Yeah.
But I want to stay on your childhood for a second before we get there, because I know, of course, you were born in Ghana, but you spent time in the UK and other places as well. And you're someone who has had this fascination with change or transition, because you've gone through so many of them. So I'm curious to know, and you could think about your transitions at a young age or even in your adult years. How do you go about creating that space for yourself where you feel that sense of belonging in the different settings you find yourself in?
Yeah. Most definitely, the older you get, obviously, the easier it should become. And for me, it did become easier just because I understood myself better, right? But as a child, I must say, I closed myself off quite a bit out of fear of just overstepping. I didn't even know what the boundaries were. So rather than overstepping, I'll just, just stay in my corner, do what I got to do, be the best that I can be, but don't overstep in any way, shape, or form. And that's how I went about creating the space for myself. I did excel in that space, but then I look back now and I'm thinking my teachers didn't see the full blown Mary. at that point, because of the environment that we were in. And as I grew older, I think that I took time to understand the space better. I also aligned myself with people who were more comfortable in that space, right, to try to understand it better. And I just kept working hard. The harder I worked, the more I got noticed by my teachers, who then took special care to attend to whatever issues were coming up. So I think it was during the years, I can see just that transition of finally being able to create the space for myself as an adult, right?
You mentioned something about not overstepping your boundaries.
Yeah.
And it's something that I even experienced when I was going through my schooling in Ghana. So I grew up in the United States, but during my middle school years, my parents sent me to Ghana to live there for a few years. Greatest years of my life. I
Mm.
actually ended up attending Engelbert School for a year,
Okay.
and then I did 2 more years at Ridge Church School,
Mm-hmm.
where I graduated, did the BC, went through that whole process. And one thing I remember being in that setting was just there was a fear to there's a fear of overstepping boundaries, especially when it came to teachers. And this is a time where corporal punishment, well,
Mm-hmm.
canes
Mm-hmm.
were more than legal. Like every teacher had a cane.
Mm-hmm.
You said a wrong answer, you can get caned for that. If you came late to school, you can get caned for that. You could get knocked. You could be kneeling down with your hands up in the air. We went through all the different types of punishments. And it makes me wonder about just the state of schooling, particularly in Ghana, because I know there was a time where my school, Richard School, was one of the top schools in Accra. I think we were
Mm-hmm.
rivaling with Morning Star at that time. And GIS was the only international school, in my recollection, in the late
Mm-hmm.
90s. So you fast forward to 2024,
Mm-hmm.
you have a whole plethora of international schools that are just all over Accra, just Accra alone. And you see that some of the methods that I experienced as a kid of chewing poor and the discipline in a lot of the government schools are still in existence. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of that, because I know you came back and now you're at GIS and you've probably heard or seen some of these things. You're wondering, have we evolved? How have we not evolved from some of these
Yeah.
practices? I know I
Yeah.
have. I don't.
Well, we have evolved ever so slowly, right? And
Mm-hmm.
continue evolving. And
Yes.
I think that that's not unusual at all. Education is really so important that I fear abrupt changes may not be great for the system. It's a system,
That's
right?
right.
And so we have to take our time, and it has to be very deliberate and very well thought out. I'm glad, though, that certain things like the corporal punishment that you described, they have all been struck off, in the Education Act. Of course, there could be there could be that village somewhere. There could be that teacher
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. I mean, you know
Yep.
what I mean? So at least it's a law, and from the law, then you can actually enact certain things. So we've moved ahead in that regard. Um, we're also much more. I'm seeing more educators in the public system more excited about what they do compared to when you said in the 90s, right? You were in
Yeah,
school in
late 90s. Yes.
late 90s. So For grandmamas like me who were in the school system in the 80s, I think back sometimes when my classmates and I talk about it, we're like, how did we even survive? Because we don't remember teachers caring. We don't remember anything other than chew and pour. We don't remember any structure in our classrooms. Sometimes there were no chairs. And this was in some of the best schools in the country, So I feel like we've come a long way, but the internet has done something amazing for us where, kids can go online and report something. Well, just talk about it, and it can go viral. It becomes a big deal. Everybody's talking about it, and then action is taken. So in that regard, I'm just so grateful that there is a communication tool that children can use. Anybody at all can use, really, to put the word out there. So I'm hopeful. And oftentimes when I say this, people think it's because I'm in GIS. That's why I'm hopeful, right? But that's not the case because I interact with teachers from all over Ghana. We have a teacher conference first week of October, and we get teachers from everywhere coming, and I interact with them a lot. And what I'm hearing is that more people are choosing education, as opposed to, that person who graduates with a humanities degree can't find a job and says, oh, well, let me teach. Like you don't need anything to teach, but, a degree. Or that person who finishes a science degree and can't find a job. And so, oh, let me be a biology teacher. Let me be a chemistry teacher. We've got lots of disappointed wannabe professionals, right, who choose teaching. So actually, my very first staff meeting at GIS, I remember asking them, I said, how many of you chose to teach? And one or two hands went up. And I said, so the rest of you didn't choose to teach. You just happened to get into it and you decided to stay. And I saw some nods. And I said, well, I'm in that second group too, right? I didn't think I was going to be a teacher. I was heading towards being a researcher. And then teaching found me, and I realized this is what I should have been doing my whole life. And I said, but here's the thing. You didn't choose teaching. Teaching chose you. And you have decided to stay in teaching for one reason or the other. Maybe like me, you found that this is your calling. Maybe you've looked around and you're like, this works quite well for my life. Because for me, in the initial years, the reason why I stayed in teaching was because it was so convenient for the family. The school that I was teaching at was the next street from my husband's workplace. And the school was a K-12 school. So my son could attend the same school. So we could all sit in one vehicle and drive in the same direction. Hubby drops me off, me and Abeku off, and we're in that safe space. When he closes from work at 5 o'clock, he just drives down to the next street, picks me up. It was convenient. And there was an income. It wasn't great, but there was an income, So for whatever reason, you have stayed in teaching, right? I don't mind. But once you're in, you better give my kids the best education possible. No slacking. If you slack, I get rid of you, right? Don't stay because there's nothing else. I don't want that kind of attitude. Stay because you want to, all right? And find your why, why you're there and what you should be doing to give the best possible experience to kids. So I find that more and more teachers are seeking this out. I don't know whether they used to, but I was a young person, so I didn't care about those things. But as an educator, lead educator right now, I think that more teachers care about their professional development. And like you said, there's so many more international schools now in Ghana. GIS was the first international school in the country, and then Lincoln followed. And then there was this big gap. And if I recall correctly, in the 80s, Association came along. In the When was it when I heard about Roman Ridge? It was somewhere in the 2000s, and then Arayan maybe in the early 2000s again. So, late 90s, early 2000s, then it just blew up, such that now parents have a choice. There's Faith Montessori. There's so many,
It's a
right? And then
lot.
you still hear there are, and then you still have your Morning Stars, your Red Church, Christ the King. They're all still there as well. But from where I sit, there's a lot more collaboration between us, and that's a good thing. We all have our niches. So, if someone can afford British International School, GIS, Lincoln, somebody from Morningstar shouldn't be competing, to get those same students because the price point is different.
Yeah, totally agree. And just staying on the topic of bringing more young people into the teacher profession, I want to think about that on a grander scale, thinking about the African continent. As somebody who has worked with other school leaders in different countries within the continent, I'm curious to know what you believe are the keys in making that pipeline sustainable for African teachers to not just be employed in international schools, but even in government schools as well. Because we're not just limiting it to the
Yeah,
international schools.
right. We've got to be intentional about communicating the value of the profession. You know,
Yes.
very, very rarely do you find someone standing up and saying, "I'm a proud teacher. I'm a teacher, and I love it." And you know, um, I remember one time filling out. That was the time when at the Kotoka airport you had to fill these embarkation and disembarkation cards. Now you don't have to do that anymore. But there was a line there that asked for profession, right? And I always put teacher. I didn't even put educator. I put teacher. So there was this one time that an immigration officer looks at it and says, "So you're a teacher, eh?" And I go, "Yes." "Eh, are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Why don't you think I could be a teacher?" "Ah, that's teachers, eh? Teachers. I mean, what is it? And you have flown. Teachers, do they have money to fly? And it was just this derogatory description of what a teacher is or should be, which was quite offensive, right? But I've met some teachers who remind me that what he was saying wasn't too far off. They hate what they do, but they're still in it, continuing to do badly. So I feel like it starts off with us having a certain comprehensive communication plan. It's almost like a rebranding of the profession, right? That we have to start off with. Be proud of who we are, the legacies that we leave behind, the impact that we have in society. And then one of the things I've spoken about at various conferences is about looking at it. You mentioned pipeline, and I love that because it has to start somewhere where we start encouraging people to go into teaching. Now, when you talk to government about paying teachers more, because that's almost always the first place you start when you want to encourage
Always.
people, money, pay them some good money, right? Now, I can't remember what the term is in economics. I'm not an economics or accounting person, but there is a term. I remember one time describing it to my son, and he used a term where there are so many of you that the cost of having you is so high that each individual then gets a smaller piece of the pie. I don't know if maybe one of your
I know what
listeners.
you're talking about too. I just can't remember the
Yeah.
term.
Yes, yes. So because of that, there's so many teachers. Well, we can't afford to pay you that well, right? So when it comes to the money bed, I know that that's a tough thing. But when you meet good teachers, really great teachers, it's never about the money, is it? It's never about the money. They teach because they love it. They teach because they can't wait to see kids, So it really begs the question that if when you interview the really great teachers, it's not about money, should money be the first thing that we're thinking about to reward these people? Right? Maybe there are other things that they would like, right? I keep going back to Teach for America and the plan that they had of going into universities looking for the top performers and saying, can you give us 2 years of your life? Right? And for a lot of young idealistic people, yes, why not? It's fun anyway. We're going to send you to some godforsaken part of the country. You're going to,
Won't be a great school.
You'll have an adventure. So we have Teach for Ghana, and they've got amazing, amazing people who've gone to parts in the North and the Volta region. And I can remember the lady who set it up, can't remember her name now, but they interviewed her one time and she said, she remembers, I think it was part of a thesis, maybe a master's or a PhD. And she was just so full of excitement. And then in the first couple of years, she realized everybody who had gone into Teach for America was leaving after 2 years to go and do what they had originally thought they wanted to do, whatever profession it was, Wall Street, government, whatever. They were all leaving. And this just cut her up because she kept thinking, but no, I wanted them to stay. We need them to stay. We need our very best in education, not our worst, not the people who didn't pass courses. We want the ones who did exceptionally well. And then one day she had some sort of an epiphany where she realized, it wasn't just, just sitting in the dark kind of epiphany. There was a bill that was going to pass in Washington, and a bill that was up for discussion. And
Yes.
They were surprised that the number of people who voted for education or voted as educators would in the bill. And a further search of their backgrounds indicated that many of them had been Teach for America fellows. So this lady started seeing that, okay, I'm going to be recruiting the very best. I'm hoping some of them will stay, but many might not. That's okay. Wherever they go, they will not forget how it felt like to teach a child. And at the end of the day, we need advocates for teaching, right? Teachers don't usually advocate for themselves. They're not terribly good at it. You need lawmakers who understand. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
You need business people who appreciate the quality education we're trying to give. Because at the end of the day, that pipeline ends with them, where they are employing those people that we educated. So all those people who end up benefiting from the good teaching that we are giving our students, we need them to care. So that's okay if they leave, because that pipeline starts over from university, right? Where you can do the encouraging thing, but you've got to put your money where your mouth is. Get them into the profession for them to understand, and then provide supports for them. You need to provide supports for them. You need to recognize that they are independent thinkers. It doesn't work when you have a principal or a head of department constantly breathing down your neck, right? We need to let teachers be, if we hire the right people, right?
That's
Leave them be and let them create that environment for children to succeed in, right? So we start off by recruiting the right people. And then when they are in place, we need to provide support for them, whether through PD, like you had mentioned earlier, just recognizing that there could be burnout, give teachers a break, let them feel comfortable enough to say, I need a day off.
That's right.
I need to rest, provide that environment that is so supportive of that, and look for little things. Teachers love little things, they love apples and they love coffee cards and, things like that, especially in the States, right here, where are you going to get coffee cards, But here I see that they love having Milo and tea in the morning.
Yeah.
At GIS, we've got a clinic. So they love the fact that when they get out of their cars, they pass by the clinic before they get to their offices and their blood pressure is taken. And somebody cares and somebody is looking out and reminding them. So little things.
So this season, Identity Talk for Educators Live will be including ad spots for businesses, products, and events that are adding significant value to their communities. And here's the catch: you don't have to be an educator or an education-based business to be a part of this. We're looking for people who are just doing great work in the community, and we want to use our platform as a way to amplify their work. So if you are an entrepreneur or you know of an entrepreneur who is doing just that, bring them in our direction. Have them reach out to us. If they want to learn more about their ad spots and how they can get themselves promoted on this platform, they can contact myself, Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. I'll say it one more time. It is Kwame at identitytalkforeducators.com. Hope to hear from you, and let's keep on amplifying our work and building each other up. Yeah, all that. And I think what's cool about Ghana is that for those who've never lived in Ghana, when you finish your college and university, you're required to do a year of national service. And it could be in any profession, any industry. But why I mentioned that is because that's another opportunity for young graduates to get their feet wet in the school. Maybe they're helping a teacher, maybe they're doing some administrative work, but they're at least getting a chance to see how they can see themselves helping in the education system. And if they decide after that year, I don't think this is what I want to do, but I do want to support in another capacity, that's still a win. Like you mentioned, that is still a win.
Big time. Yeah, the UK introduced a program. What was it again? The tagline was just so beautiful. It was something along the lines of "Give us a year of your life" or something like that. And they weren't even targeting new graduates. They were targeting people already working in various fields. And they're like, you know what? Do you want a bit of a shakeup? Do you want a bit of an experience? Give us 1 year. Right. And then they negotiate with the person's company and they try to make up the difference. So it was some kind of a trust or something that, was working with the government on this. And a lot of people who just felt like they were in dead end jobs, have taken up this challenge because you never know. When I was a professor at the university, I was in Southern Ontario, and we were interviewing students who wanted to enter the Bachelor of Education program. And there were 2 entry points. One of them was your typical, from high school, you're coming into college, and that is the degree that you want to, the subject or degree that you want to major in. But then we had others who had degrees already, were working, and perhaps wanted to come and do the top up, which was 18 months at that time. And then that was pure education courses, the practicum training, all of that. So there was this gentleman who came for the interview, and I've never forgotten his story because it was so intriguing. When we said, "What do you do? What do you do for a living?" He said, "I work in a funeral home." And we're like, "A funeral home?" And he goes, "Yes." We're like, "Okay, tell us what brings you to this point in your life where you want to make the switch from funeral homing to teaching children." And he wanted to teach primary kids. And he said each time there was a funeral where children had to be in the funeral home, he always would prepare crayons and paper. He had activities for the kids planned, right? And he seemed to be thinking ahead. And each time the adults would say, were you a teacher? And he'll be like, "No, I'd never thought of it." And then they would always say, "You should be a teacher. You should be a teacher." And so one day he said, it just hit him. "I'm around dead people all the time. Who are the most alive humans on the planet? And it's children." He goes, "I think I need to be around children a little bit more." And his story was just fascinating, so different, that he got admission, and right now he's teaching in Ontario. Fascinating teacher. It's really good. So we just have to get more creative, but it needs to start out with a branding project. Get the best to go into teaching.
Yeah, the branding, the messaging, the framing of what this work is. And this is a perfect segue. And I think the two of us are prime examples of what being an educator can look like. I'm sitting here doing a podcast with you. I'm not in a classroom teaching kids math, which is what I've done most of my career. I also write books. Have another one coming real soon. I consult. These are things that you don't come across when you're filling out an application to teach in the classroom. These are things that I discovered over time. Now, in your case, I mentioned this in the beginning of this podcast. You've done so many things. Like, you've written novels, you've written scripts for theatrical plays, you've done podcasting yourself, and many other creative endeavors. I'm curious to know what drives your creativity, and where do you draw that inspiration?
It's a survival thing. I think I'll go crazy if I couldn't create, So I have to be creating all the time. My siblings are all very creative, and we tend to do this where, we see a line, let's say something like Identity Talk, and then we go, oh, that would make a really good movie, or that would make a really good book. We're always picking up some of these signs, and turning them into stuff. So I find that probably I get too many of these ideas, and the ability to sift them and to say, this one would work, or that wouldn't work. So you know what, drop it. That has been my biggest problem. But I find that when the idea occurs to me and I get working on it, I complete it real quickly, and then I'm ready to move on, to the next one. So it's not so much that I know some people are so much better organized, where they'll say, I think, was it Stephen King who said, I have a special place in my home where I write. And then some other writers, who'll say, I write from 8 till 2. Structure. Yes, not me. The idea occurs to me, I flesh it out and stuff. I'm writing wherever I am, on my phone, anywhere I am writing. I'm putting down ideas. I've got lots of unfinished projects, as you can imagine, lots just sitting there, and, someone will say something and then I'll be like, oh, I remember I was writing a story. Since moving to Ghana, I haven't written a full-length novel yet. I've got one that's about 3/4 of the way done. It's been 10 years in the making, just because, it's a story set in the time of Yasantua. And
I'm already excited.
I know. So there's that historical piece, and I was writing it when I was sitting in Canada. And I was just feeling very un-Ghanaian, and feeling like, okay, I'm stuck at page 20 or something, because like I need to feel the space, and I'm not feeling it sitting in minus 10-degree temperatures, And then I got this job, moved down to Ghana. I was super excited because I was thinking, oh, now I'll be in Ghana. I'll figure it out, and it has been slow in coming. But last October, a bunch of friends and I went to Seychelles, because the exiles were taken to the Seychelles Islands. And I had written to the point where they've gotten to Seychelles. And I was like, I have no clue what that looks like. It's an island. And yes, I've been to a couple of islands and I can imagine it, but I need to feel it. I need to breathe the air, and I just need to get a certain feel for it. So we went to Seychelles, and I went to the house that Prempe lived in. I went to the National Archives, did my research, and then my juices just started flowing. So there was this one day, all my friends were like, we're beaching it today. And I'm like, you go, because I've got to pour this thing down real quickly, And so I did, and the story has taken a turn that I hadn't planned for, So I'm still waiting to finish it. But recently, I got a cabin up in the mountains in Mampong, and
Oh, that's where my father's from. Mount
oh,
Pong.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. The view is to die for, and I find that it beckons me when I feel like I have something to write. But I must admit that sometimes I can just sit staring at the hills and I never write a word. And for a while, I felt like I was such a loser because I would carry my laptop with me. The intent is to sit there and let the atmosphere just really take over and write. And no, I get back to Accra. My laptop has not been opened. And I keep wondering to myself, what was the point? What was the point of it? I didn't do the writing I was planning to do. But I know myself. When the time comes, I will be drumming it out at 80 words per minute on my laptop, and there would be no stopping. So, yeah. So I don't plan for it as much as one would think, but I sort of live in the moment of the things that I write.
I hear that. And you mentioned that you had some un-Ghanaian moments.
Mm.
And I think when I think about my own life, I've had a lot of un-Ghanaian moments. Being somebody who grew up in the States, both my parents, born and raised in Ghana. My mother comes from Insama. My father grew up in Mampong, both with the Konago Dumase, high school sweethearts. Decided to
Oh.
go to the States, start a family, and then I come in along with my three other siblings. And even when I was going to school in Ghana, it was just constant, we here, brony. We free bro now. Like a lot of that. A lot of questions about,
Mm.
are you really from here? Where you
Mhm.
really from? Right.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've had similar moments like that because
Mhm.
of your multiple travels, but I'm
Mhm.
curious to know, how do you embrace your identity being
Mm.
Ghanaian, but also embracing your Canadian part of your identity as well, because you also spend a lot of time there. Does that cause people to interrogate
Mhm.
your Ghanaianness, if you will?
Yeah. All the time. All
Yeah,
the time. Every single thing I do
yeah,
is because you're Canadian. You're not really Ghanaian. But those
right.
feelings have been there for so long. Because as a child, as you know, we traveled around quite a bit. And I was sharing with a friend of mine yesterday that when my husband and I got engaged, and I decided to come down to meet his family in Ghana, and he's Ghanaian as well, but we both lived in the UK. And so I decided to come down to meet his family. I remember telling my mom, I need a kaba and slate. I wanted to be Ghanaian, because I had heard some of the initial comments about, hey, wait here, so you're Brunio. So wait here, you're Brunio,
Uh-huh.
you know
Uh-huh.
okay, let me show them I'm really Ghanaian, and that was my dress. My dress had to demonstrate that. I braided my hair, trying desperately, to fit in, if that's what I needed to do to make them comfortable, with me. Moving down to Ghana, it seemed like everything that I did, even when I was on time for something, would be like, hey, white people things, just being on time, is white people things. Responding to an email, within 24 hours is like, ooh, okay. And stuff like that. Starting events on time. There were several events I would be just sitting there and I'm thinking, am I the only one who thinks there's something wrong with this? That an event was supposed to start at 9 and it's 9:30 and nobody's thinking maybe we should start, and all of these things that just sort of mark you as somebody who's not from here, right? And so you have to be able to navigate that very well so that instead of it being, I'm like this because I am Canadian, or I'm partly Canadian. No, I'm like this because that's best practice. That's it.
Mm.
It's best practice, and that's what I have cultivated over the years. Responding in a certain way, that's best practice. Responding in a timely fashion, that's best practice. Starting events on time as much as possible, that's best practice. So I find that it's in these things that people will know. My mom always teases me. She says, "You walk different." When you go to Makola, they're going to cheat you because you walk different. I'm like, "Mom, how
Mm-hmm.
do I walk?" But you can't tell. You can't tell how you have been changed and acculturated, in North America, and how that is easy to see, you know,
Oh, I
very.
can tell.
Oh, yes. Yes. And but after a while, I mean, my first one, I've got three sons. My first one is not terribly comfortable with that. The "where are you from? Are you really from here?" If you're really from here, then they start speaking Tree to you, and he can't speak Tree as well as you can, So the frustration right away just builds up, and he just gives up, you know. So it's that kind of thing, but you can't help how people think, and how they have also been acculturated, to look at you as a thing of wonder. And because you're a thing of wonder, they've got to find out even more about you and what makes you so different, right? My second son, when he came to school here when I got the job at GIS, and he got very, very ill. Went to the hospital, and we were told that he had contracted this bacteria, and it's the kind of bacteria that's in food. And so when we kept questioning him, found out that he had bought street food, and we had barely been here for a month or so. He had bought street food. And I said, "I warned you, your stomach is not Ghana stomach. Oh, it is
You
not Ghana
gotta.
stomach at all. You have to wait a
I would be
bit."
like, you be a train cock train.
Yes. And he said, "But mom, I want it to be Ghanaian, And I could see that yearning within him, that if he hangs out with his friends and they all buy wache at Auntie Muni's wache stand, that's what
Mm-hmm.
shows that, yeah, you the man, and you're in Ghana, you're not, pulling yourself away. You're trying to be like everyone else,
Wow, that sounds just like my experience. It
Yeah.
really does. Like, because I used to stay with my auntie in Achimota. My auntie passed away about a decade ago. She used to run a bakery where she'd bake bread and sell to the community. Real popular bakery from the house. And I had a friend at the time who would take me to this spot. It was a fried yam spot we go to all the time, and we'd get the yams, we get some shittal and some lots of pepper. And the funny thing is, it was moments like that where I was able to pick up the tree and learn a little bit. Like, mama bay, and mama baku, shittal count. Like, I was able
Yeah.
to pick it up because I was
Yeah.
going there repeatedly, so I could see where the sun's coming from.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how you stay connected. So I
Yeah.
yearn for that connection. I probably should have a conversation with your son because there's just so many similarities between
Yes.
what I
Yes.
went through as a 13, 14-year-old trying to
Yeah.
figure things out and some of the things that he experienced. But
Very much
it's just
so.
tough because we don't choose to grow up abroad. We were just
Mm-hmm.
born there, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we listen, we love the country just like anybody else. If people just knew. But
Yeah.
I know that we're running low on time, so I want to
Yeah.
end with this question that I ask
Mm.
everybody. How does Dr. Mary, you, stay true to the teacher in you?
I think it comes back to my philosophy of education,
Yeah.
which is believing that everybody can learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the teacher in me needs to constantly believe this, because that's the hope, right? That every child can learn, right? And constantly talking to people like yourselves. I'm thrilled when I see young people, like you, being educators, loving it, being proud of who they are. That is exciting to me. I love it when I go and speak at various places and I can see from the questions, I can tell from the questions that young university graduates are asking, that they never thought a teacher could be someone like me, right? And so I stayed true to the teacher in me by showing people what teachers could be like. So if this is your idea of what a teacher is like, well, get ready to have your mind blown by this person who does not fit the archetype that you have grown to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Just constantly reinventing myself as well, and having a lot of patience. Someone asked me some time ago, what is my greatest accomplishment? And I think they were expecting all the things that you would find on my LinkedIn, and then some. And I said to them, I think my greatest accomplishment is just developing a spirit of patience, and using that in my work. Because with children, gosh, you will not necessarily win the first time. It takes a while. And you need to have a certain heart that practices patience, all the time. Um,
Yes.
Always hopes, always dreams, um, always just giving people the benefit of the doubt, and just realizing that that child sitting in your classroom, you have no idea who they will. I wish I could meet some of my teachers. I know they would just fall down dead because they wouldn't believe that this is me, and how little we can see of the future. And so we have to deal with the present. Each child who's in front of us needs to know that they are special, they're respected, and they have the power to impact the world.
Yes. And then, real quickly, Dr. Mary, how can people connect with you, either on social media or if you have a website that they can go to learn
Mhm.
more about your work or connect?
So maryation.com, that's my website. And then on Facebook is Mary Asian as well. So they can find me easily on that. I'm not very active on X, although I do have an account. I think that one is Dr. Asian. I need to make all of them the same so that it's easier to find. But LinkedIn is very easy. My Asian is spelled with an A. So it's pretty easy to find me. Most Asians are ESHUN, and mine is
Hmm.
ASHUN. So on LinkedIn, where I do post quite a bit, it's Dr. Mary Asian. On Instagram, it's an unusual one. It's globally restless. So if you're looking for me on Instagram, it would be globally restless. Yeah, yeah.
I
So
love
that's me
it.
online. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And I know you have to go. So I want to just thank you again for your time. And I don't know if you're going to be at the International Educators Summit, but I'll be there.
Which one?
Hopefully, it's going to be July.
Oh, you mean the one down here in Accra?
Hmm. One coming
Oh,
up in Accra. Yeah.
yes. Unfortunately, I'm out of town.
Ah.
I know, I have some meetings in the States. So yeah,
uh,
unfortunately, I was supposed to be speaking. Yeah, didn't work out.
it's all
Next time.
good.
Next
Either
time.
way,
Mhm.
yeah, it's all good.
Good. Which
Your
school?
best, yeah. Your best, yeah.
Bishop, for sure. Which school are you
Yeah.
in?
Um, what school here?
Yes, in Sierra
I'm
Leone.
at a international school called IUP International
I,
School. So
how do you
yes,
spell that?
IUP, AYOUB.
Okay, international school. All right.
Yes. So I'm there working as a part-time instructional coach and teacher coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
and then I work remotely, doing some consulting with different teachers and school districts back on the state side. So
Okay. All right.
that's how I make most of my time.
Awesome. And is Sierra Leone where you want to be forever and ever? Amen. Or if you got
No,
a role in Ghana?
I'm just here because my wife. So my wife it works for the U.S. Peace Corps. She's a country director here.
Ah, okay. Okay.
So that's what brought us to Freetown.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, all the very best. And thank you for doing this for educators. It is heartwarming to have a young person like yourself be spreading the word about how important our role is. So thank you on behalf of
Thank you
all
so
those
much.
teachers.
Appreciate it. You
You're
have a good
welcome.
rest of the evening.
I will. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye. All right, everybody. So we're about to end another fantastic episode of Identity Talk for Educators Live. And as always, folks, wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We're going to do this again another time. Peace out, y'all.